Kia ora and welcome everyone. This is a short series of videos explaining to you how to write your connections report. This is for the level 3 English standard. It is worth 4 credits overall. In this particular video I will be explaining how to write the introduction of that report. So just to make sure that we're all on the same page, for the connections standard you are looking at 4 different texts, potentially by 4 different authors or directors, but could all be the same, and you will have found at least one connection that connects all 4 of those texts. Ideally you will have found 2 or 3 connections, and so that will be made up of one main connection and 2 sub-connections. That will also be the structure that I will be using in my model of this connections essay. Alright, let's have a look at what an introduction would look like. First of all, it's made up of 3 parts. So you'd be introducing your overarching connection, that is the broad question or statement that informs the reader of the ideas or links between the texts that you will discuss. The second step is to introduce your 4 texts and their authors and directors. Make sure that you've got those names correct. And also at the end of your introduction you will go over the sub-connections that each paragraph will discuss. Now let's have a look what that actually looks like in practice. So as you can see on the left here, I've got the parts that you need to include in your introduction. They're all color coded, and I'm just going to give you some examples for that. So introducing my overarching connection. What is it to be a New Zealander? It's a difficult question to ask, but it's very much of interest to the writers and directors in New Zealand when they explore various aspects of life in this country. So as you can see, what I've got in bold here, what is it to be a New Zealander? That's my overarching connection. That's a big one. It's quite broad, and that will be quite useful later on. And then in sort of normal font, not bold font, I've just got a little bit of explanation around that. That's it. You don't need more than that. So just introduce your overarching connection and that's it. You don't need to write half a paragraph on that. Next, you're introducing your 4 texts and their authors and directors. So you can say something like, by examining 4 very successful New Zealand texts, Boy and Two Cars One Night, directed by Taika Waititi, Whale Rider, directed by Niki Caro, and Big Brother Little Sister by Viti Ihimaera, we can learn a lot about the nature of what it is like to live in this very specific corner of the South Pacific. So in this one, you can see that I've put all the titles in italics. That's a good thing to do, just so you can show that this is the title, and then you've got the director there, particularly in a text like Boy, where Boy is also the name of the main character. It's important to use those italics to make it really clear when you're talking about the film as a whole and when you're talking about the character. So yeah, you can see I've introduced the titles of all of my texts and the creators of those texts, and then just a little bit more explanation around here, so we can learn a lot about the nature of what it's like to live in this very specific corner of the South Pacific, referring to New Zealand. So that's my overarching connection up here. I have also made a judgment. You can do that in your introduction. So I've already said that these 4 texts were very successful. I haven't backed that up in any way, shape or form, but it makes me seem like I know what I'm talking about. So you might as well, if you think that the texts that you're looking at were useful or successful or effective in any way. Now I need to introduce the sub-connections that each of my paragraphs will discuss, and so I'm giving an overview here, and I'm also talking about which texts I'll be discussing under which sub-connection. So both Boy and Whale Rider illustrate some of the key struggles of growing up within rural Māori communities, illustrating that this has often been defined by the overcoming of a kind of abuse. Beyond this, Little Brother, Little Sister and Two Cars One Night provide an interesting insight into the life of children in New Zealand and how abuse, both physical and emotional, can impact their lives. Okay, so just pointing a few things out to you here. So I've grouped my texts together. Boy and Whale Rider will fall under the same sub-connection, and that sub-connection is key struggles of growing up within rural Māori communities. And then the other 2 texts, Big Brother Little Sister and Two Cars One Night, will fall under my second sub-connection, insights into the life of children in New Zealand. So that would be my second paragraph. Okay, first paragraph, second paragraph. Now, if I look at all of that together, my introduction really isn't all that long, okay, but I've got all of the important things in here. There's nothing to be gained in having a super sophisticated introduction. Just make it straightforward, straight to the point, so that you're setting yourself up for a really clear report that addresses those connections, which you will discuss in depth in your paragraphs. That's the introduction is not the place for that. So, brief summary. You need at least one overall connection. Ideally you have 2 or 3, so one main connection and 2 sub-connections. And then as you're putting your introduction together, you start off with the overarching connection or the theme. And then as the second step, you introduce your 4 texts and your authors and directors. And then the last bit of the introduction will be the introduction of the sub-connections. Each one of the paragraphs we'll discuss, and you will link the texts that fall under each sub-connection. So you'll make that explicit, and then you're good to go. Alright guys, thanks for listening, and I'll be in touch soon. See you later. Bye.